So, hello. Those of you familiar with my work will know that I spend a lot of my time with students, patients, and various other people, trying to help them be more positive in a wide number of ways. And well, we all tend to benefit from healthy levels of positivity. Of course we do. However, one thing that I've struggled to come to terms with over the years is that as a trainer, as a therapist, as an author, researcher, whose main purpose in these roles has often been to help others feel happier or get better, it's that many people then expect you in turn to be Mr. Whoopee-Doo all of the time. That is, expect that I jump out of bed every morning and burst into a rendition of zip-a-dee-doo-dah. Zip-a-dee-day. What do I mean by Mr. Whoopee-Doo? Incredibly happy, positive, without flaws, without issues, who walks through life hugging, high-fiving, chest-bumping everyone that's encountered. And the way that's expected to be at the end of a Tony Robbins seminar, for example, when loud music is playing and things get a sort of evangelical even. Now, I'm not suggesting that these are bad things, okay? I'm not suggesting these are bad traits, and I'm not suggesting Tony Robbins seminars are anything other than wonderful. I know many people and have friends who love the fact that dancing and singing their way out of an event location is thoroughly enjoyable and invigorating, and don't consider it to be engineered euphoria at all. Heck, you make your own minds up about that type of stuff. I think that there is a case for some sobriety when it comes to well-being, though. Many personal development programs, I think, offer up a brand of magical thinking process, lacking in realism very often, or rational thinking, and suggest that all we need is to have a highly enthusiastic, positive thinking mindset to fully derive satisfaction and enjoyment from life. And the idea that everything can have a positive spin applied to it can make it okay. Well, without doubt, there are times and places for such wonderful notions of positivity. Yet, a 2014 study is one of a number that suggested that perhaps for some people, not only is positive thinking challenging, we know that, right? Not only is it challenging, but it could be harmful. So in this study by Moser and colleagues that was titled Neural Markers of a Positive Reappraisal and Their Associations with Trait Reappraisal, participants were asked to attempt to think positively when being exposed to troubling images, such as being held at knife point. And the lead author, Jason Moser, stated that the warriors actually showed a paradoxical backfiring effect in their brains when asked to decrease their negative emotions. And this suggests that they have a really hard time putting a positive spin on difficult situations and actually make their negative emotions worse, even when they're asked to think positively. And he also states that you can't just tell your friend to think positively or to not worry. That's probably not going to help them. So you need to take another tack and perhaps ask them to think about the problem in a different way, to use different strategies. And this was sort of major point of this important research. And it's research that pleases me because, I am not Mr. Whoopee-Doo all of the time. I think people, the people that walk through life with a seemingly Botoxed, fixed grin on their faces every waking second, potentially need more therapy than the rest of us. But I have days where I find life challenging. I get angry, I get sad, I often feel things that I intellectually, I realise I ought not be thinking, unfounded worries or embarrassment. But I found that only ever trying to shout over them with something more positive, for example, can be challenging and frustrating. For me, looking at approaches to acceptance, such as ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, as well as cognitive restructuring methods that are used in cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy, these are useful things. They're also rational and realistic, and they also have evidence to support their use, rather than someone's euphoria selling the virtues of positivity, and what's more, they have value in the cold light of day, away from the crowds. That is, if we rely purely on magical thinking, it may not be preparing us for reality or enabling us to be able to cope with real life and real life scenarios as we are, confronted by them. And then this is not only true for me personally, but in my therapy rooms, I found that my patients derive more benefit when they have usable, realistic coping skills and strategies. And they're not just expected to think positively all of the time, or just kind of put a positive spin on things. What's more, I think those that struggle to put a positive spin on things, as prescribed, as prescribed by many in the personal development fields, may end up thinking that because they're not living life as Mr. Whoopee-Doo, then there's clearly more wrong with them than perhaps they originally thought, or perhaps their issues are immovable. Therefore, be realistic with your expectations for yourself. Be balanced. Accept how you feel. It's okay to be sober at times. Learn how to restructure your thoughts in a healthy fashion. Understand that part of the human condition is such that we can't realistically just be positive or think positively 100% of the time. Understanding that, I think, will likely make you happier and lead to far less forced smiles. Recently, there have been times when I really struggled. During lockdown, having young children, running a business in a challenging financial climate, being prone to depression as I am, not being able to see close friends, not being able to attend my gym, or run my classes in the same room as my students, carry out planned research projects in the university lab, much more besides. Yeah, as I've already said, in my role as therapist and trainer, and as someone who seeks to disseminate research and content about how to prevail psychologically in life, there's a certain level of expectancy that's placed upon me, and very often by myself as much as others, to remain positive and to maintain a certain level of positivity regardless of life conditions. To give you an example, if I ever have the audacity to mention that I'm poorly online, for example, I get messages from people I'm all over the place telling me, you should be using self-hypnosis, and you should be fine with something like that. And the stuff that I usually so readily advocate, and that I should be in good health 100% of the time as a result. It's this seeming obsession with being positive at all costs that I'm speaking about today. Susan David once said, when we push aside difficult emotions in order to embrace false positivity, we lose our capacity to develop deep skills to help us deal with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And that really resonates beautifully with me. Have you ever heard certain phrases coming from someone after you expressed a negative emotion? Either personally or online, or maybe you've said certain phrases to someone when they're expressing their emotions. Don't be sad, or pull yourself together. Come on, be positive, or look on the bright side. Everything happens for a reason. I don't want to hear any more of that negative talk. Or even things like, well, at least you're not ABC, XYZ. Or it could be much worse, And these kind of phrases sound acceptable, and they sound encouraging or motivating even, and helpful on the surface. But on the other hand, they're often shaming, they're minimizing, they're undervaluing. They don't acknowledge or respect that person's reality. And this potentially has a huge impact on someone's well-being. Instead of feeling better, it risks more undermining of that person's mental health. It can make a person think that those negative feelings are not important, or even worse, make that person think those feelings are wrong or indicative of something more serious being wrong with them. And moreover, people often push back against those negative feelings and often go on to avoid certain emotions. We all love positive vibes. We love self-compassion, affirmations, making a good mantra, having positive self-talk. No doubt we love that stuff. I write and talk about those kinds of strategies often. But the timing, that's often what matters. Pushing your emotions away isn't a very good idea. The impact of avoiding emotions will usually cause further mental issues. Back in 2002, a psychiatrist named Joseph Chiarocci and his colleagues conducted research about the effects of avoiding certain emotions and showed that it typically tended to result in poorer mental health. So when people avoid negative emotion, this kind of toxic positivity can lead to alexithymia disorder. People that avoid their emotions would likely have a mental condition named alexithymia. Alexithymia disorder, it's a condition where people could barely identify their feelings. People with alexithymia tend to minimize their feelings and focus more on external events. They're more likely to have further physical disorders, such as eating problems, or be addicted to drugs, and more likely have physiology issues. They could also bring up an arbitrary action towards other people's emotions in order to get things that they want. It's been scientifically proven that humans, are born with complex emotions. Though we probably don't need science to tell us, for us to know that. Thanks to our own life experience, we're aware of that stuff, right? Emotions are seemingly uncontrollable brain chemical reactions that attempt to balance our physiological system. And every emotion matters. And it's the way our brain communicates the signals from external events. Our brain's amazing. It can incredibly detect things beyond our immediate awareness. For instance, if we are in danger, our brain will produce an adrenaline hormone, which will make us feel frightened or readies us for battle. Our body declares a state of emergency, gets into fight or flight mode. It makes us more sensitive and alert. Those hormones produced by a chemical reaction in our brain will balance our body system. And that's one good reason why managing emotions is likely to be more healthy than avoiding emotions. It's very humane to feel things, both positive and negative emotions. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable and expressing emotions, including the negative ones. However, we must all learn the most effective ways and places for expressing them. Otherwise, instead of feeling better, you may feel worse. Some unsuitable responses, may lead to further mental problems, including insisting on toxic positivity and pushing negative emotions away. Vanessa Bell Bennett says fake positivity can perpetuate a lot of the stigma around mental illness. Encouraging someone who has clinical depression to focus on the positive ways is not helpful and can actually do more harm. And this advice can bolster the feeling that they are at fault because they cannot simply pull themselves up by the bootstraps. So the question is, when can we tell if it's actually toxic, as far as this positivity is concerned? Well, perhaps the phrases used are oversimplifying things. Perhaps they're denying reality. Stuff like, don't think about it, or just get over it, just be positive. Come on, many people suffer worse. Or being told not to romanticize things, or that you are just overreacting, or using phrases such as, at least you're not da-da-da. Other sort of undervaluing phrases that tell you that your emotions don't matter. If only it was that easy, no psychotherapist, psychologist, psychiatrist would be needed in the world. Every problem could just be solved with a simple, just get over it. There you go. Oh, thank you. I'm better now. It doesn't leave any room for pain or for difficult emotions when we're constantly told, happiness is a choice, for example, or to be grateful every day, or good vibes only. Imagine you just fell off the stairs and you insist on thinking positively. Great, at least I got to the ground faster than I would have done. Okay, it's a positive reframe there. It also seems a bit bizarre and does not acknowledge what you may actually be feeling. A bit sore, perhaps. Toxic positivity could be manipulating. It forces us to be okay when things are actually not. It could manipulate our thought and make us feel as if we are weak and useless for feeling certain negative emotions. It forces us to fake things up and to lie to ourselves about our feelings. So instead of using that sort of brand of toxic positivity, what are we supposed to say? What are we supposed to do? Instead of pushing yourself or someone to change their grief into happiness really quickly, which is sometimes impossible, I think, learn to use perhaps realistic positivity. According to psychologists, realistic positivity means seeing and accepting how we are right now, both in our inner and outer world, and then putting our focus on what we would love. Therefore, this sort of realistic positivity will lead to self-acceptance. By aiming for a realistic positivity, we tend to embrace the reality and the full scope of events and emotions that happen in our life without degrading any of our other emotions. It's a way to live healthier than insisting upon staying okay all of the time, even when you're actually not. Being fine all the time is not possible. And so trying to force someone else to always be, neither is that possible. And on the other hand, toxic positivity makes us feel alone and less supported. It sort of denies the existence of life's ups and downs, and it can lead to self-abasement. So it isn't healthy for the mental well-being of a person. If you're suffering from any kind of toxic positivity, let me share a couple of ideas to help deal with it. Firstly, awareness. The first step to adopt a healthier approach to our emotions is to be aware of the behaviors. Aware of the behaviors that could be accounted for as toxic positivity, whether that's in ourselves or when talking to other people. There is toxic positivity when we're hiding what we feel or dismissing our emotions or feeling guilty for the negative emotions that we feel or minimizing other people's experiences by telling them, stop worrying about it, think positive, don't be sad, or shaming other people for feeling negative emotions. Secondly, acknowledging, however, what you resist persists. Pretend the bad emotion is not there, but it still hovers around like a pesky fly you'd rather not have to swat, and you hope it flies away, ignoring it with the hopes that it'll just go away by itself. And that kind of tricks you into thinking you've made a choice, and thus you've exercised a measure of control. But in reality, there's no way to control whether it repeatedly comes back, buzzing, or flies away forever. Acknowledging its presence, accepting that it's there, even though you don't want it there, is incredibly empowering. You actually bring it into a personal space for you to be able to exercise more control over it, over you. You coax the emotional fly into a confined box where you get to decide how to deal with it. You do have more control over your desired outcome. Self-compassion. I mentioned this earlier, accepting your difficult emotions compassionately without judging them or yourself actually helps with coping. And it decreases the intensity of those very emotions. Remind yourself that facing one's biggest fears can actually diminish its impact and lessen how frightening it actually is in reality. Perhaps make a list of options that you could explore in order to solve or deal with the situation that's triggering the negative emotion. And then try them out for size. Or choose the one that gives you the most peace or relief. And doing this actually allows you to start feeling a sense of control. It encourages realistic hope, and it instills a sense of empowerment. See how you want to or can manage them. You decide how you get to control it for a change. Transformation. As much as we hate failing at something, for example, we also need to consider the fact that we might experience failure of some kind or a setback. And failure is going to help us grow as an individual. Adopting a growth mindset, being aware of your progress and your development is what we want here. You don't need to fear failure. Instead, you should consider that as a useful experience, as an opportunity for growth and for transformation. Whenever there's an ill-fated situation, we usually say to ourselves that it happened for a reason, or to look at the bright side. Consider taking responsibility for what happened, and don't just ignore it. Take some action. Focus your will to change your current situation. And the next time something negative happens, ask yourself, what can I learn from this situation? Acceptance. I've spoken about this a lot, but sometimes we don't need to do anything other than accept our feelings and be okay with them. Don't insist that they need to be converted into positivity. Just accept them. Be okay with them. Recognize the reality. Sometimes we don't even need to attempt to change them. So, while it's important, some final idea, while it's important to keep an optimistic outlook, absolutely, especially in building emotional resilience, it's just as important to be practical and to see all sides of a situation objectively, to accept the sometimes negative reality of challenging issues so that we can better prepare for them and adequately manage their possible consequences. Negative emotions like sadness, guilt, grief, anger, they're often a kind of beacon to our values. We don't usually get angry about stuff we don't care about. We don't usually feel sad or guilty about stuff we don't care about. If we only ever push those emotions away, we're choosing not to learn about ourselves. We're choosing to ignore our value of what's important to us. Expressing negative emotions is not a sign of weakness. Both positive and negative emotions are the sign that our brain is healthy. Excuse me. So be careful and beware of this toxic positivity. And don't be afraid of being authentic and vulnerable in situations. It takes both sun and rain for flowers to grow. So do subscribe to this channel. That's it today. You'll get notifications of my latest videos as they happen that way. Do go visit my college website for details of our upcoming classroom-based courses, all of our online courses and hypnotherapy and self-hypnosis. I send you my very best wishes. Goodbye for now.